All right, so you're thinking about heading out on the water.
Kayaking, maybe?
Exactly.
And especially if you're renting from a place like Motor City Paddle Club, we're diving deep into kayak paddles today.
You got it.
Because choosing the right one is super important.
Right. Like, can we just talk about how much of a difference a good paddle can make?
Huge.
Well,
I mean, the paddle is literally the engine of your kayak.
it's
Choosing the right one can really
Yeah,
transform your whole experience.
Okay, so less fatigue, more efficient paddling,
Definitely.
and ultimately more fun out there on the water. So where do we even begin? What are the key things to keep in mind when choosing a paddle?
Well, first off, paddle length is crucial. It might seem basic,
Yeah.
but getting the right length for you and for your kayak makes a big difference.
Okay, so how do we figure out the right lengths?
Basically, it comes down to your height and the width of your kayak. Taller people in wider kayaks generally need longer paddles.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's all about leverage.
Right. Exactly. You need the right length to get the most power out of each stroke. Now, we also need to think about paddling style. Have you ever heard of low angle and high angle paddling?
I have. But to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what the difference is.
All right, well, low angle paddling is what you'll typically do for those leisurely trips on calm water.
Okay.
You know, keeping the paddle pretty horizontal, close to the surface of the water.
Mm-hmm.
High angle paddling, on the other hand, is more common in whitewater
Okay.
or racing,
Gotcha.
where you need more power and a more vertical stroke.
So does that mean you need a different paddle length depending on whether you're doing low angle or high angle paddling?
Exactly. Low angle paddling usually calls for a longer paddle
Because
you're reaching further out with each stroke.
that makes sense.
For high angle,
Mhm.
a shorter paddle will actually give you more control and power.
Okay, I think.
And the source material we have actually includes this really handy chart with recommended paddle lengths.
Oh.
It takes into account your height and the width of your kayak.
Oh.
So for example, let's say you're about 5'10" and you're using a standard recreational kayak.
Okay.
For low angle paddling, you'd probably be looking at a paddle around 230 centimeters.
Mm.
But for high angle, you'd want to go a bit shorter, maybe closer to 220 centimeters.
Wow, that's super helpful. I never realized there was so much to think about just with length.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it than you might think.
So what about the blade itself? There are so many different shapes and sizes out there.
Right, and choosing the right blade can really make a big difference in your paddling experience.
Okay, so let's break it down.
Sure. First off, you've got symmetrical blades, which are identical on both sides. And then you've got asymmetrical blades,
Mhm.
which have a shorter side and a longer side.
Why the difference? What's the advantage of an asymmetrical blade?
Asymmetrical blades are all about efficiency.
Oh, okay.
They're designed to reduce what's called torque, which is that twisting force you feel when you paddle.
Ah, I've definitely felt that.
Right. So they create a smoother, more even pull through the water, kind of like a propeller, where each part of the blade is working in harmony with the water flow.
So are asymmetrical blades just for experienced paddlers?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, they're often favored by folks who've been kayaking for a while, but
Yeah.
they can actually benefit anyone looking for a more comfortable and efficient stroke. Symmetrical blades, they're simpler and they're usually found on beginner paddles.
Right.
But I would say
Yeah.
don't be afraid to try out an asymmetrical blade if you get the chance.
I'll keep that in mind.
Uh-huh.
And then there's the different blade designs.
Mhm.
Flat, dihedral, wing. I'm a little lost in all the options.
No worries. It can seem like a lot at first.
It does.
So flat blades, those are your most basic.
Mm-hmm.
Dihedral blades, now those have that raised ridge running down the center.
Oh, okay.
Almost like a keel on a boat.
Got it.
That ridge helps to channel the water more smoothly, which reduces flutter. Have you ever felt that shaky?
What, unstable feeling?
Yeah.
That's flutter. And
Yeah.
a dihedral blade can really help minimize that.
It's like having a built-in stabilizer.
Exactly. And then you've got wing blades.
Those look pretty intense.
Those are the high-performance options, often used in racing,
Oh, wow.
shaped kind of like an airplane wing,
Yeah, I can see that.
curved to maximize lift and speed.
Yeah.
Imagine slicing through the water with minimal effort.
That's the dream.
Right.
Yeah.
But they do require a pretty specific technique,
Okay.
so they're not necessarily for everyone.
Makes sense. It's amazing how much science goes into designing these paddles. I never would have thought about it this deeply before.
It's pretty cool. There's a lot that goes into it.
So I'm assuming the size of the blade also makes a difference?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A smaller blade will create less resistance,
Okay.
which is great for long-distance paddling or if you just want to conserve energy.
Yeah, I can see that.
Imagine paddling for hours with a huge blade. You'd be exhausted.
Yeah, I can see that. A larger blade, though, delivers more power per stroke.
Mm-hmm.
So if you need quick bursts of speed,
Well,
or you want to be able to maneuver easily in tight spaces, a larger blade might be a better fit.
so again, it really depends on what kind of kayaking you're doing.
Exactly. There's really a paddle for every type of adventure.
All right, so we've got length, blade shape, and size. What's next on our paddle checklist?
Let's talk about the shaft. You've got straight shafts, the traditional option, usually lighter, less expensive,
Mm-hmm.
but they can be a little tougher on your wrists, especially on those longer paddles.
Yeah, I can see how that would get tiring after a while.
Right. And then you've got bent shafts, which are designed with ergonomics in mind.
Oh, okay, so they're angled to...
Yeah, they're angled to reduce that strain on your wrists and joints.
Gotcha.
Picture holding your hand out as if you're shaking someone's hand.
Okay.
That's the natural position that a bent shaft encourages.
So it's like the difference between using a regular screwdriver and one with an ergonomic handle.
That's exactly. Much more comfortable.
But I bet there's a trade-off, right? Bent shafts probably cost more.
They do tend to be a bit pricier, and sometimes they're a little bit heavier than straight shafts.
Okay.
But for a lot of people, the added comfort is worth it, especially if they're planning longer trips.
Yeah, I can see that.
It can make a huge difference.
All right, we've got the shaft figured out. Now let's move on to materials. What are our options here? I've heard terms like fiberglass and carbon fiber thrown around, but I'm not really sure what the difference is.
All right, well, materials play a huge role in a paddle's weight, durability, and overall performance.
Okay.
For blades, the most common materials are plastic or nylon, fiberglass,
Mm-hmm.
and carbon fiber.
Okay.
Plastic or nylon blades, those are going to be your budget-friendly option.
Okay.
They're super durable, great for beginners,
Hmm.
but they are heavier
Got
than
it.
the other materials.
So those are like the entry-level options.
Exactly.
What about fiberglass?
Fiberglass is a step up in terms of performance. It's lighter than plastic, and it has more flex,
Okay.
which can be easier on your joints, especially during those repetitive paddling motions.
Yeah, I could see that being a big plus.
And then you've got carbon fiber, which is kind of the top of the line material.
Yeah, carbon fiber sounds like the fancy stuff. What's so special about it?
It's incredibly lightweight and stiff,
Hmm.
which means more of your energy is going into propelling the kayak forward rather than being wasted on flexing the paddle.
So it's more efficient.
Super efficient, super responsive. It's kind of like having a sports car engine for your kayak.
I like that analogy. But of course, that performance comes at a price, right?
Right. Carbon fiber is going to be the most expensive option.
Makes sense. So it's all about finding the right balance between performance and budget.
Exactly.
Do those same materials apply to the shaft as well?
They do. You'll find aluminum shafts, fiberglass, and carbon fiber shafts.
Okay.
Aluminum is the most affordable,
Right.
but also the heaviest. And it can get really uncomfortable to touch in extreme temperatures.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't want to be holding on to a freezing cold aluminum shaft in the winter.
Right. Or burning hot in the summer sun.
Exactly.
So fiberglass shafts offer a nice balance. They're lighter than aluminum, they've got good flexibility, and they're comfortable to hold in any weather.
And then, of course, carbon fiber shafts are the lightest and most high performance, but probably also the most expensive.
Right, just like with the blades. It's all about finding that sweet spot between performance, durability, and your budget.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Length, blade shape and size, shaft type, even the materials.
Yeah.
Before we move on, can we talk a bit more about paddle weight? You mentioned lighter paddles being better for longer trips, but why is that?
Absolutely. Paddle weight might seem like a small detail,
Yeah.
but it can actually have a big impact on your experience, especially on those longer trips.
Okay.
Because a lighter paddle means less fatigue. You're not lifting and swinging as much weight with each stroke.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's like the difference between swinging a heavy baseball bat and a lightweight one. You're going to tire out much faster with the heavier one.
Right, right. So it's not just about muscle strength. It's about conserving energy
Exactly.
and reducing strain on your joints.
You got it.
So a lighter paddle will allow you to paddle for longer periods and just enjoy the experience more.
And it can even make a difference in your paddling technique.
Oh, really?
Yeah. With a lighter paddle, you can have a faster stroke recovery, which means you can paddle more efficiently and cover more ground.
I'm starting to see how all of these factors really work together to create that perfect paddling experience.
It all comes together.
All right, what's next on our list?
Let's talk about feathering.
Okay.
Now, feathering is a feature you'll find on many kayak paddles, and it can really make a noticeable difference in your paddling efficiency, especially in windy conditions. Have you ever heard of feathering?
I've heard the term, but I'm not really sure what it means.
Okay, so feathering refers to the angle between the two paddle blades. So a feathered paddle means the blades are offset, while an unfeathered paddle has the blades aligned.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And the reason for feathering is to reduce wind resistance on the blade that's out of the water during your stroke.
So it's like having a more aerodynamic paddle.
Exactly. And many modern paddles even offer adjustable feathering angles.
Oh, cool.
So you can customize it to your preference.
That's awesome. I never knew there were so many options.
There's a lot to consider.
So we've covered paddle length, blade shape and size, shaft type, the materials, weight, and even feathering. Is there anything else?
There is. We should definitely talk about budget. How much are you willing to spend on a paddle?
Right, that's always a factor.
And we should also touch on specialty paddles, which are designed for specific types of kayaking.
Okay, those both sound important.
Definitely. So let's talk about budget.
Okay,
How much are you willing to spend on a paddle?
right, because that's always a factor.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the good news is you don't have to break the bank to find a good paddle.
That's good to hear.
Generally, paddles fall into 3 price categories: entry-level, mid-range, and high-end.
Okay, let's break those down. What kind of price range are we looking at for each category?
All right, so entry-level paddles are typically going to run you somewhere between $50 and $100.
Okay,
These are usually made from aluminum shafts and plastic or nylon blades.
so they're going to be,
Durable, but a little bit on the heavier side.
right, which makes sense for that price point.
Exactly.
So those are a good option for beginners.
Yeah, for beginners.
Or anyone who's just getting their feet wet, so to speak.
Exactly. Then you've got mid-range paddles,
Mm-hmm.
which usually fall between $100 and $250.
Right.
These often feature fiberglass components,
Mhm.
offering a good balance of performance and affordability.
Okay, so you start to see
Yeah,
a difference in the weight and feel
definitely.
compared to the entry-level paddles.
You'll notice a difference for sure.
And then, of course, we have the high-end paddles.
The creme de la creme.
Exactly. What kind of investment are we talking about for those?
High-end paddles, you're looking at anywhere from $250 to $500 or more.
Wow. Okay.
These are typically made from carbon fiber, which we talked about earlier.
Okay.
It's incredibly lightweight, stiff, and efficient,
Right.
designed for those serious paddlers who really want that top-notch performance and are willing to invest in it.
So it sounds like there's a paddle out there for every budget.
There really is.
You don't need to go all out on carbon fiber
Nope.
if you're just starting out. But it's good to know that those options are there as you kind of progress in your...
Exactly. And as you get more comfortable
Mhm.
and start going on maybe more challenging trips.
All right, so let's talk about specialty paddles.
Okay.
I know we touched on this briefly before, but I'm curious to learn a bit more. What are some examples of these specialty paddles, and how do they differ from your kind of average all-purpose paddle?
Well, just like there are different types of kayaks out there. You know, you've got those built for leisurely lake paddling. You've got those designed to tackle whitewater rapids. There are paddles specifically designed for different kayaking styles and environments.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what are some examples?
So one type is touring paddles.
Okay.
These are built for efficiency and comfort
Oh, okay.
over long distances.
Mm-hmm.
So think multi-day kayak trips.
Yeah.
Or extended explorations. They often have longer, narrower blades
Okay.
to help you cover more ground with each stroke.
So it's kind of like having longer
Yeah.
gears on a bicycle.
Exactly. They also tend to be lighter weight to reduce fatigue
Right. It makes
on
sense.
those long paddles.
So if you're planning on logging some serious miles,
Yes,
a touring paddle would be the way to go.
a touring paddle is the way to go for that, yeah.
Awesome. Then you've got whitewater paddles, which are a whole different...
Whole different ball game.
Exactly. Those are designed to be...
Super durable, maneuverable in
Mm.
those rough conditions.
Yeah. They're typically shorter than touring paddles,
Okay.
with a more robust blade shape that can really handle the bumps and splashes of rapids.
Yeah, I bet those are pretty tough.
Oh, yeah. You wouldn't want a flimsy paddle when you're navigating whitewater.
Exactly. Are there any other types of specialty paddles that we should know about?
You've also got recreational paddles,
Okay.
which are kind of your all-around versatile options.
Right.
They're a good choice for casual paddling on calm waters, like lakes or slow-moving rivers. They don't have the specialized features of a touring or whitewater paddle,
Right.
but they're great for beginners or those who just want a comfortable, easy-to-use paddle for those leisurely excursions.
And thinking back to Motor City Paddle Club, I bet they have a great selection of those for their rentals.
I bet they do.
I know they have a wide variety of kayaks available to rent, too.
Yeah, they do.
Do you think it's important to try out different paddles along with different kayaks?
Absolutely.
Like, does it really matter that much? It really does.
Okay.
I mean, the paddle is an extension of your body when you're kayaking.
Mm.
And finding the right one can make a huge difference in your comfort, your efficiency, and just your overall enjoyment out on the water.
Yeah.
Just like you wouldn't wear the wrong size shoes, you don't want to paddle with a paddle that doesn't feel right.
That's a good analogy.
And different kayaks handle differently too.
Right.
So trying out a few paddle options
Yeah.
can help you find the best match for your chosen boat.
It makes perfect sense. Just like you'd test drive a car before buying it, you should try out different paddles
Exactly.
before committing to one.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're heading to Motor City Paddle Club, which, by the way, you can find at www.motorcitypaddleclub.com, don't be shy about asking their staff for recommendations
Oh, yeah.
and trying out a few different options.
Yeah, they're great.
I'm sure they are.
Most rental places,
Yeah.
including Motor City Paddle Club,
Mm-hmm.
are happy to help you find the right gear. They want you to have a safe and enjoyable experience.
Of course.
And choosing the right paddle is a big part of that.
All right, so we've covered the main factors in choosing a paddle:
Mm.
length, blade shape and size, shaft type, materials, weight, feathering,
You
budget,
said it all.
even specialty paddles.
Yep.
But before we wrap things up, I want to touch on something that often gets overlooked: paddle maintenance and care.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
I mean, a paddle is an investment, right?
It is.
So we want to make sure it lasts.
You want to take care of it.
Exactly. So what are the key things we need to keep in mind to keep our paddles in tip-top shape?
The most important thing is to rinse your paddle thoroughly after each use,
Okay.
especially if you've been paddling in salt water.
Right.
Salt water is corrosive, and it can damage those materials over time.
Gotcha.
So give your paddle a good rinse with fresh water. Make sure to get all those nooks and crannies, and then wipe it down with a towel.
Okay, rinse and dry. Got it.
Yeah.
What else should we be doing?
It's also a good idea to inspect your paddle regularly for any cracks, chips, or other damage, especially if it's made from composite materials like fiberglass or carbon fiber.
Mm-hmm.
Those materials are strong, but
Yeah.
they can be susceptible to damage if they're dropped
Right.
or hit against rocks.
Good point. I'll definitely be more careful about tossing my paddle around from now on.
Mm-hmm.
So rinsing, drying, inspecting. Any other maintenance tips?
The last tip is all about storage.
Okay.
You want to store your paddle in a cool, dry place out of direct sunlight.
Gotcha.
Heat and UV rays can weaken the materials over time, so it's best to keep it protected.
Makes sense.
Ideally, hang it up vertically or lay it flat to prevent warping.
Okay.
And if you have a paddle bag, that's even better for protecting it during transport and storage.
Great advice. So if we take good care of our paddles, they'll take good care of us out on the water.
Exactly. A well-maintained paddle is going to perform better, it's going to last longer, and ultimately, it's going to enhance your overall kayaking experience.
Awesome. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We
talked about all the factors to consider when choosing a paddle. Length, blade shape and size, shaft type, materials, weight, feathering, budget, specialty paddles, and even maintenance.
We really have covered a lot.
It's been quite a journey.
Yep.
But I think we're ready to wrap things up. What are your final thoughts for our listeners who are getting ready to embark on their kayaking adventures?
You know, I would say choosing the right kayak paddle is a personal decision.
Mm-hmm.
What works best for one person might not work for another.
Right.
So take the time to consider your individual needs,
Okay.
your paddling style,
Mm-hmm.
the type of kayaking you plan to do.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah.
The folks at Motor City Paddle Club or any reputable rental place are there to guide you and make sure you have the right gear to make the most of your time on the water.
That's great advice. Don't be afraid to ask questions, try out different options, and really find what feels right for you.
Exactly. And with the right paddle in hand, you'll be well on your way to experiencing the joy, the freedom, and the adventure that kayaking has to offer.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of kayak paddles. We hope you found it helpful and informative. And stay tuned for the final part of our episode where we'll put all of this knowledge to the test and help you choose the perfect paddle for your next kayaking adventure at Motor City Paddle Club. All right, so we've covered a ton of information
We have.
about what to consider when choosing a paddle.
Right.
But now let's put it all together.
Okay.
And imagine we're about to head out on the water, maybe with a Motor City Paddle Club rental.
All right. I like it.
What kind of paddle would be ideal for different scenarios?
That's a great way to bring it all home.
Right. It's one thing to know the theory,
It is.
But picturing yourself actually out on the water really helps to make those practical decisions.
Sure.
Okay, so first scenario. I'm picturing a beautiful, sunny day, calm waters on a lake, perfect for a relaxing paddle with friends.
Sounds perfect.
What kind of paddle would be best for that kind of leisurely adventure?
You know, in that case, you wouldn't need anything too fancy.
Okay.
Since you're going for a relaxed pace on calm water, a recreational paddle would be a great choice. Think of it as your all-around, comfortable option.
Okay.
You know, you wouldn't need a long, narrow touring blade or the super durable build of a whitewater paddle.
So what would you recommend specifically in terms of length, materials, all that good stuff?
All right, so for length, you'd want to refer back to that chart we mentioned earlier,
Right.
taking into account your height and the width of the kayak.
Right, right.
But generally, for a leisurely lake paddle, you're probably using a low-angle paddling style.
Okay.
So a slightly longer paddle would be comfortable.
Okay, that makes sense.
As for materials, a fiberglass shaft and blade would provide a nice balance of weight, performance, and affordability.
Yep.
Lighter than aluminum, a bit more flex, which can be easier on your joints.
Makes sense. Okay, let's switch gears. Imagine I'm feeling a bit more adventurous,
Okay.
and I'm planning a kayak trip down a winding river,
All right.
maybe encountering a few small rapids along the way.
Now we're talking.
What kind of paddle would I need for that?
That's where things get a bit more exciting. For a river trip, you'd want a paddle that offers more control and maneuverability.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about high-angle paddling?
Hmm.
That's the technique you'd likely use in a river.
Yeah.
So a slightly shorter paddle designed for that style would be ideal.
Okay, so shorter for better control in the current. What about the blade shape? Would a symmetrical or asymmetrical blade be better in a river?
You know, an asymmetrical blade would be a good choice for a river environment.
Okay.
It creates a smoother, more even pull through the water, which can be really helpful when you're navigating currents and maneuvering around obstacles.
And what about the shaft? Straight or bent? I can imagine my wrists getting tired from all that maneuvering.
Yeah, you're right. A bent shaft would be a wise choice for a river trip.
Okay.
It can help reduce strain on your wrists, make paddling more comfortable, especially when you're working a bit harder against the current.
So we've got a shorter paddle with an asymmetrical blade and a bent shaft. What about materials? I imagine durability would be pretty important in a river,
Oh, absolutely.
where you might bump into rocks or branches.
You want a paddle that can stand up to a bit of abuse.
Exactly.
Fiberglass would be a good option.
Okay.
But if you're really concerned about durability, you might consider a carbon fiber paddle. It's the strongest, most impact-resistant material,
Right.
so you wouldn't have to worry as much about damaging it
Gotcha.
if you happen to hit a rock or two.
Carbon fiber sounds like the way to go for a more challenging trip.
It's definitely a good option.
So there you have it. We've gone from a leisurely lake paddle to navigating a winding river.
Yep.
And we've figured out the ideal paddle for each scenario. It's amazing how much of a difference the right paddle can make.
It really is. And the best part is, Motor City Paddle Club likely has all these paddle options available for you to try out.
Oh, that's great.
With their rentals. They can even help you choose the perfect one based on your plans and your paddling style.
That's the beauty of renting. You can experiment with different gear before committing to buying something.
Exactly.
So before we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to emphasize one more time how important it is to ask questions and get advice from the experts.
Yes.
Whether it's the folks at Motor City Paddle Club or any reputable kayak rental place, they're a wealth of knowledge.
They are.
And they can help you make sure you have the best possible experience out on the water.
They want you to have a great time.
Exactly.
So yeah, don't hesitate to ask for help.
All right, so with that, I think we'll bring this deep dive to a close.
Sounds good.
We hope you learned a thing or two about kayak paddles and that you feel empowered to choose the perfect one for your next kayaking adventure.
Absolutely.
Remember, Motor City Paddle Club is a great resource.
It is.
So be sure to check out their website at www.motorcitypaddleclub.com to see their rental options and plan your next trip.
All right.
Happy paddling, everyone!